I think we have participation, so I'll go ahead and read the rules for public participation. Speakers should limit their comments to 3 minutes. Comments about the actions or statements of individual staff members are not appropriate for public comments and should be referred to the superintendent of schools or processed through available channels. If submitting written testimony, speakers are requested to provide a copy to the president. Please remember that this is an opportunity for the community to address their comments to the board. It is not an opportunity for dialogue. If you have questions that need an answer, please contact the superintendent or write a letter to the Board of Education and a response will be sent back to you. I will be timing the comment portion at 3 minutes. 30 seconds left. I will advise you of the 30 seconds, and once the timer goes off, we'll move on to the next participant. So the first person I have is Mr. DeVillio.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Couch, audience members, and everyone watching on our live stream at home. So I'm here tonight on behalf of the King County Public Schools Education Foundation Fund. Today is Giving Tuesday, when we celebrate and support our local nonprofits helping our community. As part of Giving Tuesday, we've been participating in Midshore Gives. It's a fundraising event put on by Midshore Community Foundation that supports organizations like our Education Foundation. If you tuned in to 90.5 WHS today, you heard the students, you heard our foundation board members, you heard Dr. Couch and Principal Hemstetter and myself talking about our foundation, how it helps our students, teachers, and the whole community. King County Public Schools Education Foundation is raising money to help fund field trips and provide grants for teachers to launch innovative programs. Your support will also help renovate the planetarium at the high school and expand opportunities for the whole community to enjoy that space. We're asking people to make tax-deductible donations online today. You can go to midshoregives.org and just search for King County Public Schools Education Foundation and click donate. And we thank everybody for their support, and also a big thank you to Chris Singleton, Ken Collins, all the students at the station today, and Dr. Couch and our guests who came on to help raise some money for the foundation. We think it went really well. It was a really fun radiothon we did today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next participant is Mr. Frank Rhodes.
Good evening to the board and Dr. Couch. I just have 2 small items I want to go over. Before the election, I wanted to do a special day for the bus drivers. So I couldn't get a hold of Joe Wheeler today. I guess he's out of town and not here. So I was wondering, either before Christmas or afterwards, I just wanted to have a day where we would sponsor a lunch like at Fat Daddy's or something where all the bus drivers could come in and get recognized. I think it would be sort of important. I've talked to several of them and they like that idea. The other thing is, I've been watching a lot of the Spartans games this summer, and I heard word from a couple folks that they're going on a trip, which we have contributed some money to, and the schools south of us will let them go, but apparently in Kent County they have to, they can't get permission to go, and if they miss more than 3 days, they'll fail their class. It's not a school-sponsored thing, but it'd be nice if you would give them a break if they do homework while they're away or something. I don't know how that works, but they really want to go. And apparently, as I said, the school districts to the south of us, now I haven't verified this, but I've been told that they're letting them go and there's no problem for the 3 days that they have their football championship down in Florida. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. The next participant is Mayor Foster.
I'm sorry. I intended to put this in with the King County Public School. I'm sorry, with the middle school.
The comment?
Yes, thank you.
We're not going to have comments open to the audience at that point. If you'd like to speak now, that'd be great.
Now or never?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I apologize for late. I was also caught in the traffic. I really want to thank our school board for the openness, the transparency, the diligent process, the fact that you're researching the best possible locations for the new Kent County Middle School. And it's obvious, as mayor of Chestertown, I do bring certain bias with me. But I want to say at the outset that I agree with all of you. The single most important thing is the educational benefits of this school. And I happen to believe that, I think back when I was in middle school, it was when the first time I began thinking in terms of public institutions, the courts, the local government, the police, the sheriff, local colleges, and having a middle school that is close to those facilities by being in Kent County, being in the county seat, is a real educational advantage. I also want to comment back on the cost estimates in various locations. And as a civil engineer myself, I know that cost estimates are somewhat reminiscent of political polls. They come with a certain margin of error. I think it's reasonable to estimate that those errors in engineering, civil engineering estimates, 10 to 15% plus or minus on every one of those estimates. So that it really, in terms of the cost of each of these options, is pretty much a tie across the board. I just would like you to keep that in mind as you move forward. I appreciate doing a full-scale study on this. And once again, the most important thing is the educational benefit of that location for all of these young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is moving into the superintendent's report, and we have the FFA convention presentation. I think we have some guests in the audience.
Good evening, Dr. Couch and President Yates and other board members that are here tonight. So we are coming in here to update you guys on our past FFA National Convention trip. We had a great time and we are willing to explain everything that we did over the course of the slideshow here with you guys tonight. And I brought some fellow officers, friends, and advisors as well that will help explain it to you very briefly. So.
Good evening, everyone. I am Stephanie Hogan, the Vice President of the FFA, and I am here to explain the expo part of the trip. It was an amazing experience just to walk in there with so many people who all share the same experiences as us, and there were so many different colleges that you got to explore. There was one of my favorite, the University of Tennessee, and it was really great to connect with everyone and to really talk to people who went to college there and understand the program and how it actually works. There was also fun activities, as you can see through the pictures, where we took funny pictures. We also got to decorate chickens as cookies, and they were super good. There was also custard, where they would count how many people go through the line. It was insane. It was definitely an amazing experience, and so thankful I was able to go.
Hi everyone, my name is Delaney Jewell, and also at the convention we got to do service and action projects. So one of the ones that we participated in was a dog and cat toy. So as you can see, we have some of our members holding up a braid that acts like dog rope. So we did really good with those. Another one that we made was cat empanadas. So we had felt and we put catnip and stuffing in them. I will admit we struggled a little bit with that one, but ultimately we made a lot. As you can see on the table, we filled up so many boxes. They went to the Indianapolis Humane Society, and we also got to take away what we could bring back to Kent County as a service in action. And it was also really cool to be in a room with everyone in the state because you have to hear kind of what animal welfare and all of things was.
So my name is Linda Getz, and I'm here this evening on behalf of alumni. I was allowed to attend with these fine students for alumni. And I'm here to explain a little bit about opening session. Each time FFA has a meeting, which you guys have all seen, and many of you have seen in the community, there is a format for how that session works. There are specific things that are said. It's done on a local level, it's done on a state level, but to see it done on a national level with 70,000 students all together was eye-opening. Trevor actually leaned over to me and said, "Whoa, that's more people than King County." So to be able to see that it's a small thing that we do locally, but it's on a larger scale was absolutely eye-opening.
Good evening, I'm Emma Morris. I am the historian for the MFA chapter. So we got to explore the city on multiple occasions. After dinner, we went and just explored Indianapolis at night, and we got to see the monument and the dark picture of, there's just like this beautiful like, angel at the top of it. And around that area, there was a silent movie playing with an orchestra there, so that was really cool. We were in the capital of Indianapolis, so we had all the state buildings there, and we had different memorials for firefighters, law enforcement, military, so that was very cool to see as well. And then we got to go to different museums and different activities around the city. So I went to the NCAA Hall of Champions, which was very cool to see as somebody who wants to go into college sports and further my career in that. And I also got to see the NCAA headquarters. And then there was also the opportunity to go to the zoo, which was very cool for the agricultural and animal people that were there. And then we were also by the University of Indiana. So being able to be that close to college was pretty cool. On walks around the city, I found a ballpark. I found a stadium. It was right by Lucas Oil, which is the home of the Indianapolis Colts.
I am Jen Kulzepp. I'm the FFA advisor. So the kids had a chance to do an educational tour while we were there. So many of our students opted to do the zoo trip. So our kids, the second class that they take in the program is animal science. So it was kind of nice to take a break from like dissecting animals and see some live animals up close and personal. And some of the students that went on this particular tour had never seen a seal, had never seen an elephant, had really had a chance to get up close and personal. And as you can see from the pictures, they got to feed some different birds that were there. So that was a pretty cool experience. They do offer lots of different educational tours of different places in the city, so that's something we hope we can expand a little bit next year and investigate some more stuff. Okay. So closing session, I had a few kids left with me that we did after that last day. That was actually really neat because we got to see the changeover of the new officers. So we do that here on a smaller scale, but it's huge there. I mean, these kids were like crying. I found myself crying like in the audience, and I didn't even know these kids, but just knowing how much they put into it. These kids were absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to thank everybody that went with me, chaperoning Ms. Getz and Ms. Morris. 70,000 teenagers descended upon the city, and everyone was polite, and that was just incredible to see. I think it really speaks to the FFA organization as a whole. So I think they learned a lot. They got to get out of their bubble a little bit, see kids from all over the country, and it was just really cool. So thank you so much for letting us go.
And if anybody has any questions about the events that we partake in, then just fire away.
What is it meeting other students like yourselves? How does that work?
So in the convention center, it was very interesting when so we have all the states and counties across the back of our jackets, and as does the whole nation. So it was very interesting to see how North Dakota differs from Hawaii, from Puerto Rico to Key West to, I think, Maine. They talked about a lot of maple syrup. And it was very interesting to just brief conversations with people that you wouldn't really recognize in another situation. Was nice to hear about because everybody was very genuine there, and there wasn't a person that I bumped into that wasn't as nice or as short as the next person, and they were all very nice. So,
Do you all like do any like trading goods or materials from state to state or
so
The FFA chapter?
thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. Okay, moving into education services as we approve the amended agenda. The next item up will be the blueprint for Maryland's future, KCPS update.
Good evening, President Getz, Vice President Johnson, members of the board, and Dr. Couch. I am back again with the quarterly update on the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, the implementation in Kent County Public Schools. Specifically, what I would like to address with you this evening is just to give you an update on where we are with our Blueprint policy area committees. We've been very active with those meetings. With Mr. DeVillia, we have some updates to the Blueprint website that I'd like to make you aware of as well. We are about to become very busy with completing our comprehensive Blueprint implementation plan, so I'd like to update you on what that template is potentially going to look like, and then closing out with sort of an idea of how we're approaching the completion of this comprehensive Blueprint implementation plan. So you can see here the makeup of our Blueprint policy area committees. We do have 67 individual members on these 4 different policy area committees or pillar committees. The graphic here demonstrates that our 2 largest constituent groups are our community members, which account for nearly half of the membership on these committees, followed by school-based staff, including teachers, guidance counselors, social workers as well. Looking at that green section of the pie chart, you can see who these community members are. So we have local business owners, we have child care providers who are instrumental in guiding our approach to the early childhood education pillar of Blueprint. We have a member from the Department of Social Services, the Kent County Chamber of Commerce, local health care providers who are providing a lot of guidance to us as well as retired educators from across the state and nation. We also have representatives from local higher education there. Going back, I will say that each committee has met at least once, with the exception of early childhood and high quality diverse teachers and leaders. Those committees have met twice. Moving to the Blueprint website update, we're really committed here, especially through the website, to transparency of implementation. So you can see, if you were to visit our page, you would see our mission and vision statement, which clearly articulate the goal of the Blueprint committees and our approach to implementing the Blueprint. You'll see as well sort of our vision for how these Blueprint policy area committees will inform the creation of our comprehensive plan. You can see as well, if you were to visit the page, you would see the committee membership breakdown, which I just displayed for you in the pie chart. We are committed to transparency, like I said, so as we have these various committee convenings, our agendas will be posted and have indeed already been posted for public view. So it's no No mystery what it was that we were discussing in the Early Childhood Education Committee meeting on October 4th. You can take a look at that on our page. In addition to that, following with our theme of transparency, all of the mandated blueprint reporting, all of those reports that we're completing, we are publishing both at the state level and then locally on our website for you to consider. So already our July report on hiring practices. More recently in November, we submitted our plan for expanding school behavioral health services. Our technology spending report as well was published in November. You can see there in black font, 3 reports due December 1st, so you can imagine it's a very busy time around the central office for us here, but certainly next week those reports will be available for public view as well. So moving into the implementation planning portion of the presentation this evening, this is a graphic that I shared with you in August, and it has not changed. You can see that the timeline began in September 1st when MSDE published their criteria for success, which was essentially a rubric that gives us some guidance on what qualities our implementation plan would have to meet in order to be approved. So we have that in draft mode. We are walking up to December 1st, which is Thursday. We're eagerly anticipating the Accountability and Implementation Board publishing our implementation plan template. So in mid-October, I believe, MSDE and the AIB published sort of competing versions of what this template would look like. Since then, they've sort of hit a partnership stride, and what we have now in draft format is sort of a merger of those 2 implementation plan templates. We're fairly confident that the template that will be published on Thursday, probably more likely Friday or Monday, we're fairly confident that what they are going to be giving us as the final template is going to be very close to what we have in our hands currently. So that draft template that we currently have has sort of informed our approach to moving forward with creating that draft plan. You can see March 15th, that is still our end deadline. We need to submit our comprehensive blueprint implementation plan by March 15th. And moving toward the beginning of fiscal year 24, that is when we would either have our plan approved or it would come back to us for revisions. So I did say that we had the draft template in our hands. We've had that for some time now. So I did want to, and as I said, we're fairly confident that that template, the draft template, is going to look very similar to what they give us on or shortly after December 1st. So you're seeing 2 screenshots from that plan relative to Pillar 3, which is the CCR policy area. On the left, you can see that we have various tasks and subtasks which require narrative responses and artifact uploads. Whereas on the right, we had a series of data tables. So we would be taking the data that we have here in KCPS, and we would be uploading that into the various data tables that are present in that template. So when we begin whittling away at this thing, this is essentially what you're going to be seeing are these very blue blueprint template pages. So I do want to spend some time here. This will be the sort of the lengthiest portion of my presentation. Having had access to this draft template for a couple of weeks now, we've been able to go through and to take a look at the tasks, the various tasks and subtasks by pillar or policy area. Confident that these are not going to change substantially between now and the final draft. I do want to sort of showcase for you what some of these tasks are that we will need to report on. And I also want to follow up on that with what we're currently doing in terms of implementing here at KCPS some of these tasks that we will be reporting on as well. So what we'll be seeing in the following slides are what it is that we need to report on and what it is that we're already doing in implementing. So beginning with early childhood education, you can see that there are 4 large tasks which are displayed for you. We need to expand our high-quality, publicly funded, full-day pre-K for Tier 1, 3, and 4-year-olds. Those Tier 1, as a reminder, are those families who are at or below 300% of the federal poverty level. Bit of a head start here in KCPS because we have the universal 4-year-old program, but we are looking at how we would go about expanding our 3-year-old program. To that end, we need to report on our efforts to implement a mixed delivery system that is public and private. So we're in the process of developing a communication strategy with our private providers to ensure that we have an effective partnership. Having implemented the kindergarten readiness assessment this fall, we need to take a look at that data. We need to set projections for next year's implementation of the KRA. We need to take a look at our approach to training our teachers to ensure that they're implementing the KRA with fidelity. That's in the early childhood policy area portion of the template. And then finally, we're working in concert with our Judy Center to ensure that they are empowered to expand to support families here in Kent County Public Schools. So that's what we're reporting on. What are we currently implementing? We are very busy within the realm of high quality early childhood. We are in the process of gaining Maryland Excels credentialing for Rock Hall Elementary School and Galena Elementary School. We already have a Maryland Excels rating of 5 out of 5 at Garnett, partially because of their Judy Center that they have there, but we are working through the process with Mrs. Yoder at Galena and Mrs. Sparrow at Rock Hall Elementary School to ensure that they are demonstrating the high quality of that early childhood program at their buildings. Policy Area 2 is high quality and diverse teachers and leaders. You can see the tasks displayed there. We are working off of the July 1st hiring practices report that we published, and we're ensuring that we are monitoring the quality and diversity of our workforce here in Kent County Public Schools. We are having conversations with institutions of higher education, both within Kent County, on the Eastern Shore, across the state, and outside of the state, to ensure that we are prepared to handle the new standards for teacher prep programming, and to ensure that we have the systems and structures here in KCPS to effectively mentor the new staff that we're bringing in. We are supporting our first ever national board certification cohort moving into the winter. We do need to begin, or rather continue, planning for the phase-in of our career ladder, which would be beginning to implement in fiscal year 25. And we are looking at ensuring that we're hitting the state marks for improving educator compensation as stipulated in the statute there. So that is what we need to report on. It looks small, but it's, those are the major tasks, but let me tell you, there are quite a few subtasks there that we need to ensure that we're prepared to report on as well. Within the realm of current implementation, as I said, we have 13 educators, which are representative of each of the 5 schools in KCPS, and they are being supported through our supervisor of human resources and some of the other currently nationally board certified staff that we have in Kent County Public Schools. We want to ensure that these 13 educators are well supported to move through the process of becoming nationally board certified. It was a very lengthy process simply to apply to be considered for national board certification. So we want to ensure that that they're supported and they're not struggling as they're actually getting those certifications. You might recognize a gentleman here in the graphic. Policy Area 3 is our college and career readiness pillar. This is in terms of page length and just size in the implementation plan template. This is what's occupying most of the space here. It's a very data-heavy policy area in terms of reporting. So what are we looking at here? We need to ensure that we're affording equitable opportunities for all students to become college and career ready, with an emphasis in ELA and math. So that's going to require a lot of disaggregation of data by student group, projecting student outcomes by student group over time, which we're already doing. This will align very nicely with our strategic planning. We need to sort of, we're not just looking at students in high school. We need to begin looking at students in middle school to ensure that by the time students are in high school, they are prepared to become college and career ready. So we're looking at the systems and structures going all the way down at the middle school level. We do need to prepare to implement in this coming fiscal year a CCR student support pathway for those students that are not deemed college and career ready. Just as a reminder, we're working with an interim standard for college and career readiness. So this is students earning a 4 or a 5 on the English or math MCAT assessment. We are actively exploring our post-CCR pathways, which include CTE offerings, early college, dual enrollment, and we're looking to ensure that those programs are well built and well advertised for the students who be benefiting from them. We are preparing to partner with our local colleges and with the Workforce Investment Board to provide career counseling for students all the way down to the middle school level, and we need to show that we need to report that we are indeed building those sorts of structures. Within the realm of current implementation, if any students currently dually enrolled this fall at Chesapeake College would have already been notified that their tuition was reimbursed by Kent County Public Schools. That is directly out of the Blueprint College and Career Readiness Fund, which in statute students are not to incur costs when being dually enrolled at a local college. So we are currently having conversations with Washington College and Chesapeake College to refine our approach to providing those dual enrollment opportunities at no cost to the students. Policy Area 4, which is more resources to ensure that all students are successful. Really, we're looking at some of our more at-promise groups here, including English learners. The Maryland State Department of Education last December published their interim report on the status of EL education in Maryland. And they just recently, I believe for the end of October, released their final report with a series of recommendations for improving the education of English learners. So we are going to be acting off of that report to ensure that those systems and structures are in place to support those students. Likewise, with students with disabilities, our special education department is going to be working very closely with us to ensure that we are reporting on the systems and structures in place to ensure that all teachers are teachers of students in special education, not simply our special education teachers. We want to continue the practices that we've already begun here in KCPS to support students that are attending schools in high concentrations of poverty, those being our community schools at Rock Hall Elementary School and Garnett Elementary School. And as I stated earlier, we did publish our November 1st report on the expansion of health services to students. So we need to ensure that we are continually refining our approach to providing those services to students. Within the realm of current implementation, we are focusing on Rock Hall Elementary and Galena Elementary, our two stellar community school coordinators in those buildings, and the health staff as well, which are funded through the personnel grant in the concentration of poverty grant. Each of these community schools are moving into their second year of community school eligibility, which means that we need to publish their implementation plan. And we are moving forward very fluidly with them to ensure that that implementation plan is going to adequately align with the needs assessments that were orchestrated in the last school year. To that end, we have partnered, sort of in the absence of state guidance, we partnered with local school systems, including Cecil County Public Schools, to ensure that we have sort of a well-informed approach to supporting our community school coordinators. And our final pillar here, pillar 5, is governance and accountability. Really, what we need to report on here are just efforts to support blueprint implementation planning, being sort of at the forefront of blueprint implementation planning myself. I can say that this will be a section that's completed very easily. There's ample support here in central office for blueprint implementation, also across the school system and within the community. Stakeholder engagement is a big piece of this pillar, but I think we have a great communication plan and a great engagement plan, which will really inform the creation of this implementation plan. We need to ensure that by the time we publish this implementation plan on March 15th, we also have a concrete plan for monitoring blueprint implementation over time, and a plan for ensuring that state aid is directed toward the source that it is intended to be focused toward. So the current implementation goes back to what we started with this evening, which was our committee in our stakeholder engagement through our blueprint policy area committees. Both locally and statewide, we're having continuous conversations around best practices for implementing the blueprint to ensure a strategic approach to implementation plan. Now, the next slide I'll tell you, it is a bit busy, but please allow me to show you what this is. So between now and March 15th, we are responsible for completing the comprehensive blueprint implementation plan. And this is just a very busy schema that is showing us how we are strategically moving toward that March 15th date. So your sort of plum-colored home plate shaped structure there, that designates our blueprint policy area committee meetings. So you can see that they are spaced beginning in early October to the left, all the way up to March 15th. And in fact, these committee meetings will continue to meet even beyond the submission of our blueprint implementation plan. Boxed in orange, those are our steering committee dates. So we've already facilitated 2 internal steering committee dates. Even though we don't have a finalized draft of the blueprint implementation plan template, we've begun discussing internally how we will go about meeting our deadline there. The end deadline is March 15th, but you can see in the green star toward the bottom, we have set a goal to have a nearly finalized draft of our implementation plan by January 30th, which would give us a couple of weeks prior to submitting it for board approval at the February 13th board meeting. So to sort of wrap up here, just some sort of dates and points that we want you to keep in mind. March 15th is the date on everyone's calendar within the world of blueprints. We've given ourselves a nice cushion here, telling sort of backward mapping to January 30th, which would give us, as I said, a couple of weeks to make any final changes prior to submitting it for board approval on February 13th. Even before January 30th, that would give us a total of 12 blueprint policy area committee convenings, which will guide our approach to implementation planning. This will give us 6 internal steering committee sessions, and this will give us, in fact, 16 different work sessions with myself, most likely Dr. Couch, and the chairs of each of these blueprint policy area committees. So it is quite a heavy lift, as everyone across the state is saying, planning to submit this implementation plan with, when even tonight we don't have the finalized template in front of us. But I think that the strategic plan that we have here in front of us tonight will certainly get us to our goal in a way that will result in effective implementation in the coming school years to benefit teaching and learning in Kent County Public Schools. With that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Regarding the early childhood, how are we going to have private, daycare or preschools involved in this? How's that?
Sure. So just speaking to what the statute requires, the statute does require that 30% of pre-K of eligible pre-K providers in each school system, 30% be private. That walks all the way up to 50% in time. So the idea being that one of the great concerns we've heard across the state is if we're expanding pre-K to 3-year-olds, there's going to be a real space issue and a real staffing issue. So I believe that this parameter for private pre-K was with the idea that they would alleviate some of the burden that would otherwise be placed on the public school system. Now that being said, there is also in the statute an allowance for a waiver, which we will be requesting this year in our implementation, because we do not have 30% of our pre-K providers being private with good reason, so that waiver would be requested for this year.
Do you anticipate that we will get up to that 30%? Have we had any private interest?
I anticipate that we'll be action planning and that we'll be communicating actively with the private providers in Kent County Public Schools to ensure that they are aware of various incentives at the state level, and essentially to ensure that if private providers, that they don't have to participate, but we want to ensure that if they are not participating, it's because they don't want to and not because they're unaware of what this process entails. So really what we want to adopt is a plan to ensure that we're actively supporting the private providers in navigating this process.
The 3-year-old program won't be required for students, though, will it? I mean, we don't require kids to go to pre-K.
Sure. So those would be Tier 1, 3-year-olds, and it's not, so that, again, this is just kind of sidestepping the language very carefully. We cannot require that a 3-year-old be enrolled, but if a 3-year-old and his or her family wishes to be enrolled and they are a Tier 1 student at or below 300% of the federal poverty level, we are required to give them a seat. There is a date for that, and the date is down the road, but also there's language in the statute that says we need to annually increase the proportion of Tier 1, 3, and 4-year-olds that are enrolled in our schools. So again, we're in a better situation than many school systems in the state, given that we have universal 4-year-old pre-K.
But we also have 3-year-olds.
Indeed.
So what proportion of our 3-year-olds are being served in Tier 1?
I don't know the exact percentage.
Well, we just have the 3-year-old program with our special education students at Rock Hall right now.
Yeah, we
It's
did
very
have a
small.
grant before, right?
It's just a handful, yeah.
So this is to sort of alleviate the concern within the current template that we have, the draft implementation plan template. I do not believe that there is anything that we have to submit to demonstrate that we are expanding immediately. We've been in conversations with school systems across the state. For instance, Garrett County Public Schools, they had a universal 4-year-old program. This year they are in the first year of implementing their 3-year-old program for Tier 1. They have 2 schools, one in the northern part of their county, one in the southern part of their county. So we're planning. We're having conversations within our committee and within our steering committee to sort of guide our approach here. We also do have a couple of grant opportunities. They are competitive grants, but should we be awarded them, those grants would support the creation of a 3-year-old program. Again, those are competitive grants, so we're not sure that we have them at this time.
Sorry, I have a question about the tuition reimbursement. So I've got a little bit of tuition reimbursement, like around a third. Are we planning on going up to full tuition reimbursement, or just like keeping it how it is for Chesapeake College classes?
So what is provided in the statute is that 75% of the cost of the college course would be adopted by the Board of Education. And that is the language that's in our current MOU with Chesapeake College, for instance. So we're having conversations very actively with both Chesapeake College and Washington College to sort of take a close look at these MOUs to ensure that we're following a similar approach with our partners up and down the Eastern Shore, and to ensure that these MOUs are in fact informed by the language of the blueprint.
So what percentage are we doing now? Are we doing the 75%? now, or?
That, to my understanding, that's what would have been reimbursed, was the 75% of their tuition at the college. I haven't seen the actual invoice for an individual student, so that would be more of a question for our finance office.
And then it would be, we do not cover fees, it's just the actual tuition.
So then, because of that understanding now, does that mean that new enrollments, they'll only be paying a portion of the tuition, that they won't have to be supplying an upfront tuition? They'll
So
only pay their-
this would be ironed out in our MOU, in our new MOU. If we're operating off of the previous MOU, it seems to be that the student would pay or the family would pay the university would reimburse the family. We would then reimburse the university. So that's the system that we've used this round for this fall. The university would have, or the community college would have reimbursed the family directly, and then we reimburse the university or the college. As we are drafting our new MOUs, we have a meeting in the coming weeks with Chesapeake College for this purpose, to discuss how we want to handle these MOUs with them specifically. So this would all be ironed out in that process of, that process will be guided by the language in the MOU.
I worry about that upfront cost to the family and whether or not that would prevent some students from being able to enroll right at the beginning.
We actually have a good number of students that are taking courses right now, and we anticipate and expect to see more students enroll in the spring.
Are they doing, are all the classes in person, or are they doing some of them online?
Some online,
I was going to say, I would think transportation is a factor.
some online, a lot, and of course, we have Chesapeake College that teaches a course on our campus, and Washington College, we're working with them to see if they will also teach a course on our campus. So we're just trying to expand and explore other opportunities to provide access to all of our students.
On this,
Sorry, go ahead, Mary.
on this matter, I'm just curious, because we are an institution. I mean, our students are part of an institution such as Chesapeake and Washington College, where the population, those college institutions are also serving surrounding counties. Is just the same language about the MOUs and similar between county to county?
Similar, but we can't say that they're exactly the same.
The historical MOU that we have with Chesapeake College is aligned very nicely with the MOU that Caroline, Dorchester, Queen Anne, and I believe Talbot all have with Chesapeake College. But the Vice President of Chesapeake College, Dr. Harper, has been very transparent about, ensuring that we're at the table to have conversations about this MOU. And as we move through December, that those conversations will be happening, I believe, in person with KCPS representation and then representation of the lower Eastern Shore counties that are served by Chesapeake College as well.
So do we have any update also on sort of the CTE aspect of this? Because is there an internship requirement still that we're trying to meet?
There is, and that's coming. There's no local requirement for a percentage of students graduating with an industry-recognized credential or an apprenticeship. There is a statewide requirement, which is very lofty, and we're nowhere near that. But really what we're waiting for in the CTE realm is the guidance from the recently appointed CTE committee at the state level. They are still, I believe they've just concluded their feedback sessions. So they've had a lot of open sessions where they're taking feedback from the community and forming subcommittees within the CTE committee. And I would believe I have checked, very recently, but I would trust that they're moving into the realm of implementation in line with what's required of them in the blueprint statute.
And is there a timeline for that as well, to reach whatever percentage they want us to reach?
There is. I could, if you gave me maybe a minute and a half, I could dig for it. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it is readily available what that date is. to hit that threshold. I don't remember exactly what the percentage is. I want to say it's 40%, and I believe we're at 9% currently. And that's not KCPS, that's the state. And again, there is no local requirement. It is only a state requirement. Could the CTE committee come out and say that they are recommending a local school system requirement? I'm sure they could. I'm not sure that they will. But anything relative to CTE programming, we would want to take the guidance of the CTE committee.
Another question. You talked on your presentation about working with our schools in our areas that have a high concentration of poverty, speaking on Rock Hall and Garnett. What work, and Dr. Tucker, you can speak to this as well, what work are we doing for the other area of concentration of poverty in the county?
So the blueprint establishes a sliding scale of eligibility, which is subject to change. And currently, obviously, just Rock Hall and Garnett are eligible for the concentration of poverty grant. The concentration of poverty grant does have two sub-grants. So currently, those two schools are receiving the personnel grant. There's also the per pupil grant, which you can only receive that when you have a higher concentration of poverty. So in time, and we have a graphic to demonstrate this, I don't have it to show you tonight, but in time, Garnett and Rock Hall will receive an additional grant through the concentration of poverty grant based on the number of students that are attending those schools. And that fund, whereas the personnel grant is to be used for a qualified medical expert and the community school coordinator, the per pupil grant is for wraparound services. So we have that. Speaking from memory, I believe that Kent County Middle School is sort of on the cusp of eligibility by fiscal year 2025. Depending on how we report, depending on how the state is requiring us to report on the concentration of poverty, those neighborhood indicators, they could be eligible for that grant. To be proactive, though, Dr. Couch has supported us in applying for the full service community schools grant, which has a bit of a lower threshold for concentration of poverty. It is a federal grant. It is a competitive grant. We're hopeful that we'll receive that. We should hear in December if we receive that. But that full service community schools grant would proactively extend wraparound services through community school status to both Galena Elementary School and Kent County Middle School.
That was my question.
Yep.
We've also heard that some school districts are considered concentration of poverty districts. Is that just based on the number of schools that have met that requirement?
Yeah.
No concentration of poverty districts.
No, there aren't school districts that have all of their schools.
Oh, I think I know what you're referring to. So within the statute, there is a provision for if you have 40, I believe, or more schools that qualify for the concentration of poverty grant, you get an additional bucket of money to pay for central office guidance over the community schools program in your school system. But that's only if you have 40 or more, which I suppose would maybe that's what you're thinking of. 40 or more schools receiving that grant would give you an additional allowance to supervise the administration of that grant.
So much of this just seems to be about process and meetings. And, a few months back, we approved some goals to reach in like reading and math and it was a retreat, but I thought it was in this meeting, in this room. But I thought they were pretty low, but the administration said they were realistic. But has the state given us goals that, what happens if after all these meetings and committees, nothing changes very much? Then what?
Sure. So guidance on projecting outcomes, that is something that we've heard a lot of in our convenings across the state with different coordinators across the state. For the projections that you're referring to, I believe it's in our strategic planning, we set projections for each student group. Those projections were double the state average, and those projections were informed by the Assistant State Superintendent for Accountability, for Assessment and Accountability, Chandra Hazlett. That wasn't something that was provided to us. That was something we had to go ask for from them. So is there, as we're planning, as we're creating our implementation plan, as I said, the CCR pillar is very data heavy. We need to be projecting out what we want to see these student groups doing. Now, what is going to happen, what will be the consequence of us not hitting those targets? What would be the consequence of us exceeding those targets? We don't know. We would certainly want to ensure that we have the structures in place to hit them and to exceed them, but I'm not sure that we have guidance from the state to inform setting those projections without going out and asking, which we did this summer.
Any additional questions?
The national board certification is I think it's great that we have 13 people in that cohort. Are we able to use that as a recruitment tool, that we have started this and that we are promoting this?
Statutorily, we are required to not only support a cohort, but to also attract a diverse cohort to participate in subsequent years. So we have the data on who these 13 individuals are. As I said, they represent each of our schools. We could take a look at what content area each of these individuals represents. We could take a look at number of years of service, and essentially all of those points would inform our process for recruiting in subsequent years. Certainly anyone who is interested would not be pushed away, but we do want to ensure that we're not neglecting any teacher group simply because our process was not well built.
I remembered when Strong Schools Maryland made their presentation to the Citizens Advisory Committee that the key to ascension on the ladder, so to speak, is all going to be contingent, on national board certification. Yes. Am I correct?
In order to move upward, there is the requirement that you possess or are pursuing NBC. A lot of the career ladder pieces are subject to collective bargaining, so it remains to be seen what what that process would actually look like. We do have models that we've seen from across the state that are very much draft of these career ladders. So that's, and we do have some time to get our career ladder in place. But I believe you're correct in saying that NBC is almost a requirement for ascending that ladder.
I think it is a requirement.
So, this cohort you have, where are they? They have to take some further courses. Where do they choose, or?
So there are various components, and they did get to select which components they would be completing initially. I believe February 28th is a date for sort of launching here into the cohort workspace, and I believe that somewhere around May. So these individuals that are in our cohort, we have a 12-week coaching or support model that we're pushing out, coordinated by the Supervisor of Human Resources, to really provide support to these individuals as they work through March, April, and into May on completing these self-selected components.
One question. Oh my God. Never mind. I lost it.
How long is the process?
The national board certification process, you can select how aggressively you pursue. So I don't know off the top of my head, because I'm not nationally board certified. I could yield to our coordinator.
So they have 5 years. Ideally, it takes a typical candidate between 1 and 3. I think what some of our staff are really striving for that are going through this cohort is to have it completed in 2.
I remember. The guidance that comes down from MSD, has that been very positive in the direction on how to create the plans, you know, how to monitor and implement and guidance?
Career 11? The career
No,
11?
I'm just talking about in general the whole blueprint. I guess I'm speaking to the whole blueprint, the process, because that has been, you know, a concern for a lot of local boards at the time is the guidance and the disconnect between the two bodies.
Sure. So there was a time when MSDE and the Accountability and Implementation Board were sort of trying to get onto the same page there, but it seems from my perspective, having been on a session with them for 2 hours this morning, it seems that they're really complementing each other well, and they're working together very well to get this implementation plan template out, and also to provide tailored technical support for each of these pillars based on the feedback that we're giving them. So they are receptive to our feedback. They have a very tight window to work, which is resulting in us having a tight window to work in, but I don't doubt their good intentions to support the school system.
Do you sense any sort of pushback against any of the changes that the blueprint is requiring? I mean, it's really hard to get people to change, especially if they've been doing the same thing for years and years. How do you get people to support this blueprint?
So I think that's a phenomenal concern, and I think that's being fleshed out a lot in our blueprint policy area committees, where we're often talking about, you know, this is a program that we need to be building it and implementing it. What are the barriers to this? Could any of those barriers potentially be themselves bridges to success? So we're really trying to, specifically within these blueprint policy area committees, kind of change individuals' perceptions of what it would take to successfully implement. If we're focused on just why it won't work, you know, we might need a bit of a mindset shift. We don't want to, we can't relitigate the blueprint, so, you know, barring some decisions for this legislative session, what we have now is statutorily required of us. So as we're planning drafting our implementation plan, we certainly want to consider what strategies we should employ that are evidence-based to ensure that everyone is going to follow our lead to benefit the students and the teaching in the county.
Mr. Porter, thank you for being on top of this. You seem to have a really good handle of where we are, and also many thanks to those in the community and all the support in the system that are kind of moving this along. There are school systems that are much larger, that have much larger teams, but the same work has to be done. So I just, you know, hats off to you and all the folks in the community as well as in the system that are supporting this. It's a heavy lift, and there's a lot of moving parts, so really appreciate that.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next item on the agenda will be the MAP data review, fall 2022.
Good evening, President Getz, Dr. Couch, members of the board. Tonight we'd like to share with you the results of our beginning of the year MAP assessment. We'll begin by looking at the next slide, which just connects everything to the vision and mission developed by you, our board members. The vision and mission really make the purpose of our school system very clear and drive and define what we do and how we do it. The words in the mission itself were chosen very carefully. You'll see words like collaborative, equitable, rigorous. These are the words that establish a standard for excellence, while at the same time really energizing each and every one of us to do whatever it takes to help achieve our purpose. This year, more than ever before, not only as a district, but at the school level, and most importantly at the classroom level, teams regularly review data to determine whether particular student groups are making the expected progress. And when they are not, determining what is the appropriate action that we need to take to make sure that we are doing everything we need to do to address any gaps in learning. This first slide really shares an overview of the results from spring 2020 22 from measures of academic progress. In early fall, it was decided that we wanted to set academic goals for this school year, not only this year, but also looking 5 years out as well. And as a board, you decided to begin our journey by looking at the data from spring 2022 on the math assessment. The goals we set in the spring were both ambitious and realistic, balancing what a student can achieve with the ambition to make that substantial growth. Just to remind every one of us, the local annual goals use percentages that reflect 2 times that of the state growth projection, holding a higher bar for Kent County. This slide shows what we established in terms of the projected proficiency, and in the area of English language arts, we had established 4.42% growth, and we set our target as a district to focus on levels 4 and 5 on measures of academic progress. These levels of performance represent students that are performing in the 61st percentile or higher on the state assessment. We did the same thing for the math proficiency, and then in terms of the student groups, we chose to set even more ambitious goals for those student groups by doubling the state growth projection. On this slide, we are now able to view not only the spring results, but what has happened this year as we assessed our students at the start of the school year. In green, in the very first box, you'll see students overall, the percent of students that performed as a district in the area of English language arts, levels 3, 4, and 5 combined. And that percentage is 48% of our students achieved levels 3, 4, and 5. The target we set, however, is slightly more ambitious, and that moved us from 48% to 29% performing at the highest 2 levels, levels 4 and 5. Our purpose tonight is to think about where we were performing in the spring and where our students are performing now with the new baseline data for this school year. Sometimes when you start the year, you'll see what's called a summer slide. It's not unusual, but when students are away from the schools for a number of months, you'll see that beginning of the year takes a slight dip. What you're noticing here is from spring to fall, we moved from 30% to 29, which is really not considered statistically significant, 29 to 30. And so our projected proficiency that we established at the start of the year was that by the spring, we would increase to 34.42 overall as a district, and then looking to the year 2025 with the projection of 43.26% proficient, and that is not proficient, that is performing in the 61st percentile or above. And I say that because that's an important distinction. We're not saying that they're proficient. Right now we are waiting, and we will see how we compare when we finally do get the results of the state assessment. We don't have a comparison now because our last assessment was in 2019, and the whole assessment has changed for this school year. So what we'd like to do now is I'm going to invite Jillian up to share with you a little bit of information about the student groups in the area of English language arts.
Good evening. So in front of you, you'll see our breakdown of our individual student groups. This has been an area of great attention. It was in setting the goals. Some of our lowest performing student groups had more rigorous growth targets than other student groups because they should, because if they were greatly underrepresented in the data, then we knew that we needed to really focus our academic efforts in moving them. So if you're looking at our 3s, 4s, and 5s, again, against our 4s and 5s, and like Gina said, we know that this state has 4 levels. MAP still has 5 levels. We don't know where those 3s will fall in that other level. So we thought it important to point them out even in just saying this many students are really on the cusp of being that, in that top performing category or those two top performing categories. But one thing to just consider when you're looking at these, there's a couple of things with the data that's important to recognize. As not just monitoring our growth, but also some of these student groups are fluid. So our hope is that a student does not stay with an IEP for their whole academic career, but the goal is to exit that student from their IEP into without needing that. So, for example, at Rock Hall Elementary School last spring when we tested, since then we've exited 3 students. So as that denominator changes, that percentage is going to change, whether it shrinks or grows, but it is not a static number all of the time. So that's one piece with the data when you're looking at with dips. The goal is to exit a child, so that's good progress, but it's going to affect your bottom line, your denominator. Same with economically disadvantaged. Last year and in the past, because of COVID, all students were considered free and reduced meals. So there was that. When we changed that this year to requiring that it be reported federally the way it has been in the past, you've completely changed that number from all students to truly a more representative number of our students who are receiving free and reduced meals. So when you look at that big gap, there's a huge change in what that number was in terms of our who was representing that student group. And then you'll see, you can see right on the slide and in the data that we have put a great effort in really putting a lot of energy, and many principals have aligned their own individual principal SLOs as well as the teacher SLOs to target these low-performing student groups, and really thinking about how are we going to ensure that all of our students are able to access what we're teaching them.
So at this point, we'd like to move into the results of our math assessment. Again, this is the math growth. And on the left-hand side, you will notice that 41% of the students performed at levels 3, 4, and 5 in the area of mathematics. And in the fall, we are at 24, 1 percentage point away from where we left off last spring, which was 25% of the students performing at levels 4 and 5. Our projected proficiency for this school year, if we increase it by the amount indicated above, will be almost 30% of our students performing at levels 4 and 5. That is the ambitious target set for this school year. And by 2025, moving almost to 40% of the students performing at the highest 2 levels. And now Nicole is going to come up and share a little bit of information regarding the student groups in mathematics.
Good evening. So similar to what Jillian said, same basic situation with math. The important part too here is what we wanted to point out was we included the 3s, 4s, and 5s because when you compare the percentage that are in those 3s, 4s, and 5s to our projection, if we can move those kids that are in a 3 up to a 4, we'll have hit our target, and in some cases, in many cases, we'll actually hit the 2025 projection. So we're really working hard to target those kids in that level 3 to get them over the hump. Again, students with disabilities, it looks like there's a little dip there, but as Jillian said, as kids move in and out of special ed, that can affect the denominator and the percentage there, and same with our economically disadvantaged because of COVID.
Okay. The next slide is just for your information. We have been presenting about by school since last winter, I believe. So we've included the school data. Again, paying attention to those 3s, 4s, and 5s. The next slide I wanted to speak to about the grades, just to give some awareness and When we, as a school team or as a district team, when we look at data, we're always thinking about what affects the data, what impacts certain grades, why some grades would have a vastly higher percentile or a lower percentile. So just some, just to kind of share with you some of the dialogue that goes on when we analyze our own data. One thing that to consider, especially moving into second grade, is the assessment stops reading to students. So if a student isn't reading yet at a proficient level, sometimes that can even influence their math data, especially if the vocabulary is unfamiliar vocabulary and they, so, there are some caveats as we shift to the test, and we do this because they begin the state assessments in third grade. I also speak to the college and career and the Maryland frameworks for college and career readiness standards. A huge shift happens in third grade and again in sixth grade. So you'll see that the standards take on a whole nother level of rigor. For example, by third grade, you'll stop seeing words like with prompting and support. By sixth grade, the language changes from opinion writing to like claims, establishing an argument, which looks very different. So there's some nuances to the standards that shift as the rigor changes. So you'll see dips in those grades as the question types are changing for kids. And in the fall, they've not had any Tier 1 instruction on what that looks like. So it's brand new to them. And well, I'll let Nicole talk about the math. So we do pay attention to that and really diving into the fall data and say, how are we going to really move those third graders now? How are we going to increase their independence? How are we going to expose them to these types of questions and text types? How are we going to scaffold the standards so that by mid-year we're weaning them off and these practices are more independent? And again, with sixth grade. One other data point to look at in 10th grade was just how Ms. Hemstetter shifted how she administered the tests. Given that last year was a block schedule, she didn't come in the beginning of the year. We had some challenges with looking at the data when your mid-year, there were only 2 administrations of the test, so you didn't have mid-year data to analyze. And then the mid-year data was mixed with students in end of course and beginning of course. So that's going to impact your results. So this year, Ms. Hemstetter, for English, they whole school-wide, all grade, the whole grade, whether they be in English or not in the fall, they are going to take it 3 times a year, which should be fine if they're getting disciplinary literacy in their other courses. They should still be reading and writing and be able to do fine as well as math. So we're hoping that we'll have some more reliable data and they'll at least have 3 data points to use to influence it. So when you see a dip there, that's just sort of a change that was made that we learned in hindsight with the block schedule. Yep, me.
So here you have the math data by school as well. So you can compare the different schools and how they performed in the fall versus the spring. Again, 3s, 4s, and 5s, and 4s and 5s. And again, just pointing out the high school numbers, it's a little different this year just because of the way that they decided to administer the test. They administered the algebra test to all 9th graders in the fall, so that's why there's a different number there. And they're going to do that again in the winter, and then again in the spring. A little bit different though for algebra. I'm going to be interested to see how those winter scores come out because you'll have kids who, again, are at end of course and still kids who still are not in the course yet. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then again here for by grade level, we decided to go ahead and include kindergarten, grade 1, and grade 2. We didn't have that for ELA because they took the reading fluency test, and Jillian's and Gina are going to speak to that in a minute. But we wanted to include that too so that you know that we are looking at all the data for all the grades and tracking their progress as well. Again, as Jillian said, you'll see some dips there because in grade 2, the test is no longer read to them. So if they have a reading issue, that can affect their score. So that might be why you see a dip from grade 1 to grade 2. And again, the rigor does increase as the grade level gets higher. And the other thing to consider with math, with ELA, basically it's the same standards each year, just the rigor increases. With math, there are totally new standards every single year. So third grade, assumes mastery of all of the standards from the grades below it, and they start fresh every year. So that's something to consider as well. So for kindergarten 1 and 2, we don't have spring data because we didn't track it then. So we just use the fall data to set targets for the spring.
Kindergarten, you're doing great.
Yes, they did. They really did.
So in summary, I know we shared a lot of information rather quickly, but what we wanted to point out, number one, is when we look from where we left off in the spring to where we are in the fall, there was minimal evidence of any type of summer slide overall with overall student performance in both English language arts and mathematics. However, when we look at the student groups, and we ask you to take your time, look through there, and we can think through this together as well. We want to look at those groups and just to be certain that we've set the right targets, the appropriate targets for this school year, both for all students and for the student groups as well. One of the things that sort of gets us enthused is that we believe that if we are able to move students at a 3 that are sitting there in level 3 to a 4 or 5, while maintaining those that are currently at a 4 or 5, we believe that we will be able to meet all of our goals, which is a really powerful statement. In many cases, if we are able to move those level 3 students to a 4 or 5, by the year 2025, our goals are realistic and are something that we will be able to achieve. So tonight, as Nicole referred to just a moment ago, we put this slideshow basically in 2 segments. The first segment focused on math growth, and that is the students that took both the ELA, grades 3 and above, and then in mathematics, grades K through 12. The next portion of our slideshow is going to focus on something you had asked us to be sure to share with you this year. So this will be the first time you will see the results of the early reading assessment. It's the foundational skills assessment. So with that in mind, let me ask you, would you like me to pause for a minute for any questions on math growth or move right into the foundational skills?
Yeah, maybe we need guys to take a pause.
Okay.
Couple of things. When I'm looking at your data here, I'm glad we are kind of modeling it after our MSDE data. I was concerned first, historically, are we doing better than we've done in the past with like setting goals and seeing progress actually happening?
I think what we've noticed, and I have several members of our team with me tonight, what we've noticed is more data-driven instructional decisions from the student level to the classroom level to the district level. And one of the things I would say Dr. King has been really adamant about, as well as the instructional team, is that it's not enough to rely on those universal screeners, but what happens in between. And we call that the progress monitoring. And now we have that happening as part of weekly occurrences in the classroom and even at the school level as part of that academy. So I would say with great confidence that we're definitely doing more than we've ever done before with using the data that we're getting.
And I'll just chime in that by having the board and Dr. Couch set targets based on spring and not using fall data to set the target for that year, it really made sure that when we administered the test in the fall, that they spent that same time with students saying, here's where you were in the spring. I really believe you can reach this again. And so they had that goal setting and they did all that they typically do around state assessments and stuff. And so I think that not seeing the summer slide that we've seen in the past, we're starting in such a different place to move up from that. So I do think what you were saying is, are we doing all of those things and is it paying off? I do believe it is. And I think one attribution to that is by setting the goals on the spring rather than starting from baseline data all over again every fall. So.
I think we also have to give a shout out to the coaches, the new position, because there's not a week that goes by where they are not in the classrooms with teachers analyzing the data. So that's another way just to see the evidence when you're walking through the schools of how we're using the information that we're getting.
And our student support coaches that are there supporting our students as they move, as we talked about moving the students from level 3 to level 4, that's where we can focus a lot of that attention.
If students read more in the summer, maybe there'd be less summer slide. I just don't see why we don't demand it.
This is the least amount of summer slide that we've seen in years past, is what we're saying. We saw larger dips in the past, and I think it had a lot to do with the summer programming that we have for all of our schools.
How often are academic learning teams dissecting the data down even deeper? And I'm thinking, like, and what I mean by that is that we can have students who are both African American with a disability and economically disadvantaged. How are we narrowing in on those students to bridge the gap if we can tackle all those 3 areas at the same time?
I would say just from my, if I'm just going to jump in, just from my perspective and looking and having our learning walks, I can tell you that our principals know down to the student which ones they have to move and precisely in what areas they need to master in order to make that movement. So I would say it is huge. If you want to speak from your...
I can talk to like our RTI, our Academic Academy Acceleration Time. It's just that. So like if there's a particular grade or a student who only needs math, they're getting math. You know, they're not rotating through math or reading. If they need acceleration and gifted and talented curriculum exposure, they're getting that. So by sitting and having those meetings quarterly, but we also progress monitor bi-weekly in our PLC teams. So, I mean, our teachers would know, I mean, they're coming to me sometimes saying, it's time to move this child. You know, we're used fall data, we've been giving them instruction, all the light bulbs are going, you know, they're making all these connections and it's time to move them in their groups. So I think that opportunity to have those student-specific conversations and looking at those ILPs routinely is making sure that they do know who's counting for us 2 or 3 times and who really needs this, or is this working, or if it's not working, what are we doing through SST process and stuff. So there's a lot of processes in place.
So it's safe to say that our students are learning reading, they're learning writing, and they're learning math. And that their learning processes, some of these processes have been in place, or some are new, and some we're extending old processes and just refining them.
Yep.
So again, it's safe to say that our students are learning reading, they're learning writing, and they're learning math. Thank you.
As we created these academies and these enrichment opportunities for students, have we also created a way to move students when they've shown progress? And
Yes, I think that's what Ms. Farrell was just trying to describe. So the groups, the academic intervention groups are fluid. And the other thing, just to bring to light, is that there are also enrichment groups that are part of that. So if you have students that start the year in level 4 or 5, they will not be receiving remediation during that time. They'll have opportunities for enrichment as well.
Acceleration enrichment.
Can you describe what does a 1 and a 2 mean?
Sure. So what we're doing is we're describing the percentile of the performance. And I actually had to, let me grab my note. It looks like we all have shared notes on. Just a moment.
One is below 20.
It is. 21st. It's the 21st or below.
40th and below.
But in terms of, say, reading, what would a 1 be for?
So it's nationally normed.
And nationally normed.
So if a student is falling in the in a 1, that means that they are anywhere in the 1st to 20th percentile amongst their peers in the nation.
So level, that's why we were saying we're looking at the 61st percentile as, so when we're saying that there are 34% of our kids in a certain, in levels 4 and 5, we're not saying that's where they're at nationally, if that's how many are in that 61st percentile. So it's kind of confusing, but I think people take these numbers and they're making something out of it that is not actually accurate.
Correct. And so I did, just if you want to have for information only, as Jillian stated, level 1 is the 21st percentile and below. Level 2, 21st to 40th. Level 3, 41st to 60th. 61st to 80th. And then the 81st percentile and above.
That would be level 5. So the levels 4 and 5 are students that are achieving at a very high level.
Yeah. Said, two more questions. With the new state test that's come down the pipe, and just thinking about maybe what other school systems are doing, I know we're not sure what that looks like, but do we have any kind of gauge, of other school systems using MAP and kind of thinking that where it's going to align, that it would align with some sort? Do we have any?
We really don't know
Right.
how
We
it's going to
certainly
land.
don't know for sure. And we have done our homework in terms of trying to collaborate with MSDE. I think you heard Mr. Porter mention earlier, Chandra Hazlitt from MSDE worked with us in terms of looking at what might be realistic targets to set for this school year. So we've tried to do our homework on that end, and I believe that with the targets we've set, they should get us on track for helping our students.
And the last part, I know we always talk about academic data and informing how we can support our students. What other types of data points that are we looking at to support our students?
Are you asking for what other data beyond academic?
Beyond,
like
like
social
test,
emotional
yeah,
data?
I guess those
Right,
things.
and I can tell you that we have a variety.
Yeah.
I mean, if we were to name the data, we're looking at behavioral data, discipline data, academic data, attendance data. There's just
a lot of data. But this is all we're reporting on tonight.
May I go on to the next?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this next part of our presentation is focused on the foundational reading skills. And just to be sure to kind of set the context for this portion of it, we are now referring to students that are in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. And when you are focusing on foundational skills, you're talking about what it takes to become a proficient, fluent, confident reader by beginning of grade 2. So most of our students are well on their way, some at the end of kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, but by 3rd grade, that should not be an option. You should read fluently and confidently so that you can begin to work on some of those higher level critical thinking skills. So with that in mind, we wanted and were required to find an assessment that allowed us to quickly diagnose how our students are performing in the area of foundational reading, and then look at setting those goals based upon that information. So what you have here in this first slide is a goal that was set by our 3 elementary schools that by the end of spring of 2023, 100% of our students will fall in the 51st to 7th. Now this is a little different. The numbers are going to be different because it's a different assessment. The 51st to the 75th percentile on language comprehension. So this is specifically set for kindergarten. That's why you see the area of language comprehension. In this overview that we're going to give you now, the goals vary by grade. So this first slide is specifically focusing on kindergarten, and you're seeing the 51st percentile. This assessment is not in 5 levels, but you're now looking at 4 different levels. And we actually put the percentiles up on that top chart, which is kind of helpful. So our fall data, we had 43% of our kindergarten students performing at the top 2 performance levels. If you want to call them levels 4 and 5, it's a little bit easier to share and think about the information like that. And then on this slide at the bottom, you can take a look by school at the number of students performing at each of the various performance levels. Very telling information, because again, if there's something that's going to drive the work you're doing day in and day out in the classroom, you want to know who your students are and where to meet them in terms of their instructional skills. And this type of assessment really gives us that information. So with that, I'm going to allow Jillian to come up and share a little bit about what I know she loves to talk about, grades 1 and 2 foundational skills.
Can I ask a question real quick? So I'm looking at
The
the
kindergarten.
slide before that. which breaks the fall data down by the schools, and for Rock Hall, there's an increase until you get to that last one. So and it's a small increase for each one, but everybody else went down. I wondered, and I know last year Rock Hall Elementary School did a really good job, so is there anything specific you can attribute that to?
I think learning a lot about taking the test, the environment in which we need to take it, small groups, just really honing in on looking at our pre-K, what standards our pre-K teachers are doing. But again, this is assuming all children went to pre-K,
Yeah,
so
and not all children
it's
need to
really
go to
baseline
kindergarten.
data. So
Yeah, I
for
get
all
that.
schools, it's really,
Yeah.
our target is to have. We know that listening comprehension is essential to build any type of reading. This is pre-reading. So if you can't follow multi-step direction, so a lot of this is just teaching students, and so some of this is maybe when we gave the assessment, had they been in school a couple more weeks, that they've already started to learn some of those social norms of school and stuff. So there could be some variance, yeah. Yeah, so I'm actually going to skip ahead to the next slide just to explain. So we adopted this assessment last year as part of our Ready to Read Act. It was required that we assess K, and then any 1, 2, or 3 who weren't assessed because it was brand new, that was all of our students. But what we found when we adopted this assessment of the growth was the growth assessment in the early years didn't really dive into like, why are they struggling? Where's the breakdown, and how much are they struggling? So what we found when we used this for the dyslexia screener for Ready to Read was this was the assessment we've been looking for to help guide our instruction. And this is really tiny. Okay. Can you have it?
Yeah, that's the last one.
Okay. So what I'm showing you, they call them domains. So there are 4 domains in this assessment. And when students learn to read, they start with their listening comprehension, and then so first off, if we have students that are scoring low in listening comprehension, we need to address that immediately because they should be proficient in listening comprehension to build those early reading skills. So to move from these areas, so these aren't separate areas, they actually transition. So once they've reached 98% accuracy and proficiency in listening comprehension, then the assessment, because it's adaptive, will start to expose the students to picture vocabulary. So, and then again, once they reach 98% accuracy and proficiency in picture vocabulary, they get phonological awareness. That's sound symbol correspondence up to like CBC words, and then moving them into more phonics and word recognition, multisyllabic words. But to move from one area to the other, they need to have reached proficiency. And that looks different depending on the grade. Yes, I think it's 98 to 100% proficiency. And then once they've reached those areas in the foundational skills, they are at the oral fluency. So I'm showing you that data to go back to say that our targets for 1st and 2nd grade, when we look at this data, again, like kindergarten, 100%, which because we don't really have baseline data, we want all of our students to be ripe to move to the next level, especially in the early years, because they're so critical for future success with reading and other areas. So we had said that in 1st and 2nd grade, they would exceed sentence reading fluency, so they're moving on past all 4 domains of foundational reading skills. They've reached and mastered those, and now they're orally reading. So it is not expected that students be at that level until the end of 1st grade. That is part of their 1st grade instruction, is to move them through the rest of those from phonological awareness, which they start in kindergarten, phonics and word recognition, and then reading, as you would know, reading, simple books with CBC words. So we know that in 1st and 2nd grade, historically, if we're being fully transparent, we've lost kids in these grades, and it's made it hard to make up in the later grades. And so we asked ourselves, we even did a session at our school last spring, what is happening here? They're doing great in kindergarten, as Dr. Costa pointed out. Like, the kindergarten data looks great. 1st and 2nd grade is where they start learning to read. And so this data has helped us understand the breakdown, but along with that and diving in and this, we've learned that we've really put a lot of the science of reading, we've put a lot of Marilyn Leeds energy into these areas with foundational skills. The teachers are all participating in letters, which is extremely time consuming and rigorous. It was very hard for me as a high school teacher. And they were seeing it, and Dr. Couch, those who have participated in the learning walks, were seeing evidence of that. Manipulatives with reading. You know, we never used to see certain manipulatives, decodables, differentiated reading groups, like you were just saying. You know, how do we know what students need what? And so now that we have this assessment, we can dive into those domains, and we've used that for even our small group in our academy. These kids need to work on multisyllabic words. These kids are still at the CBC level. And so this data, we're hoping, will really move because we've put a great deal of energy into this effort in professional learning for our teachers and making some strong instructional shifts with our Tier 1 instruction, as well as making sure that we know right off the bat when a student is struggling, and we can mitigate that more timely than waiting for lagging data from a state assessment and saying, why is this so low in third grade? So I just wanted to share it because it's been really a guiding. This assessment as well has progress monitoring built in that they can do on bi-weekly, weekly, to see them moving through those particular domains, so we don't have to wait and say they're still here, we know that they're making progress. So we can call that.
We, unlike other larger districts, we know that our board members come into the schools, and we invite you to talk to the coaches, because if you think this information is exciting, when you go into a school, they can actually show you students and the growth that they're making week by week in various areas. And to me, that's where the rubber hits the road. It's pretty cool to see that in action and see, you know, the work that we're doing is making a difference in the life of a child. So as Jillian was sharing the information, we were passing out handouts, and I know it's kind of information overload, but we also know that our board has requested us to share this information in various ways. So we're giving it all to you in ways that we hope is organized, but we'll also give you a chance to kind of digest the very different ways to pull it apart and analyze exactly the information that we're gathering. Again, the biggest difference between this assessment and the map of growth is this one goes into tremendous detail in terms of actionable steps that teachers can take at the classroom level to help students get over that hump and become proficient, confident readers. So that kind of wraps up the end of our data assessment, beginning of the year portion. And we ask you, do you wish to make any changes to the goals that we have set as a district? Do you wish to have time to think about that or come back to it, or should we continue on the path that we're on now? We just wanted some feedback and direction from you as a board.
I would say this. Kent County is leading other counties and school districts in the nation. Some school districts are just beginning to think about this work. We are way ahead, and we are on target to some of our school districts that are in public, you know, come across as, you know, the greatest and great. So I commend the work. I think the goals are great. You know, speaking with some board members from PG County, they were actually proud to see how we changed our goals to be a little bit more in tandem with those areas of MSDE and how they were looking to really pilot that work and really see that work through as well as we were doing it here. But I think the goals are great. I really want to commend your team's hard work and our teachers' hard work to make this happen. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions?
I'd like to see us stay the course. You know, we set the goals. We set them twice, 2 times higher than what the state has said is required. So I think that we need to stay the course, and our principals have bought into it, and I think we just need to move forward, keep pushing along. Got some really good assessments, so let's use them.
That seems to be the direction as I see heads nodding. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to our principals and instructional team that are always there behind the scenes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, the next item on the agenda in Education Services is the Kent County Middle School project presentation. Dr. Couch.
Okay, so unfortunately, Dr. Lieber had a family emergency that came up this afternoon, and so he had to rush his wife to the emergency room. So we are going to push forward with the presentation, not spend a lot of time in terms of rehashing what we've already talked about in the listening sessions, but really focus more on where we're at, our next steps, talk a little bit about the survey that we sent out to all of the community members and our staff, and then kind of move forward in that way. Okay. Oops. As you recall, we had about 12 options that we were looking at the beginning. We looked at grade configuration, we looked at the scope, whether we should renovate, we should replace the school, where would the location be, should it be a standalone, should it be attached, and then we also looked at the 8th grade academy question that we also wanted to answer. The planning options through the Ed Specifications Committee, we also looked at the ranking in terms of where all of these came out, and it was pretty much unanimous that the 8th grade academy was not viewed favorably, mainly because taking them out of the middle school and not providing that opportunity for the 6th and the 7th graders, and in some cases the 5th graders, to look up to the 8th grade made a big difference. And we felt like 8th grade fully integrating with the high school was not really a favorable solution. Any option that included the 2 grade levels, 6 and 7, or 5, 6, and 7, and taking the 8th grade out were not viewed favorably. Renovation of the existing building was not viewed favorably, just simply because we had a lot of discussions about putting old money or new money into an old building, and what is really going to be the long-range cost analysis in terms of doing that. So everybody, and who wouldn't want a new building? So, I mean, obviously that played into it as well. Replacement at the Wharton site was favored as a standalone, and grades 4 through 8 was an integral part of that. But on consideration, the committee also voted in favor of the attachment option because of some information that came to light from the IAC that said if we were to attach it to the high school, we could actually get some monies to renovate the high school as well. So that's where that played into it. So from there, we narrowed it down to a few options. We said we really wanted a grade 5 through 8 middle school. We opted for replacement versus renovation. The 2 locations that we had to choose from were the Chestertown and the Wharton campus, and standalone versus attached. We brought that information to the Board of Education. We narrowed it down to the 3 options that we thought were viable, and at that point the board said take it out and do listening sessions around the county, and let's get some input from the community members, which we did. I'm not going to go into a lot of the information about the pros and the cons, because we talked about that ad nauseum during the listening session. So the replacement at the Chestertown site, obviously there's some pros and cons, and we spent some time talking about stormwater management in terms of whether that is going to be a suitable site at the existing site in Chestertown. The replacement at Wharton, we talked about that in terms of the pros and cons as well. The con it would not be a walking school for most students, and many of the middle school students would ride buses with high school students. We've since talked with Mr. Wheeler, and we think that we can make some, in heavily concentrated areas, we would have separate buses for the middle school and the high school. But there would be cases where the students would be coming from locations far north or further south. We would have to put them on buses with high school students. and of course the fifth graders would be traveling out of the community. Attachment to Kent County High School, there was some work that was put into this particular scenario because we had to convince ourselves that that was even possible. And so there was a lot of discussion and a lot of legwork in terms of looking at the campus and saying, could that be done, and where would it most likely make sense to make that attachment. We also put out a community survey, and we had, at the time that Dr. Lieber and I put this together, we had 149 responses. We're up to 158. We already closed that down. You'll notice that 1923 and 94 do not add up to 149 responses. It actually adds up to 136 because some of the people that completed the survey did not choose whether they were a community member, a KCPS staff member, or a parent. So that's why you'll see that doesn't necessarily jive, those numbers. We had about 78 comments. You'll see all of the listening sessions that we held. October 12th with Kent County High School, Galena Elementary on October the 18th, the Board of Ed here in Rock Hall on the 19th, and then on the 27th we had one at Kent County Middle School. We opened up a dedicated email address so that we could get information from constituents, and we had 5 longer messages that were also analyzed in the data that we prepared. But these are the survey results. We divided it by community members, staff members, parents, and then overall. I thought it was very interesting when we divided it that way. The community members that filled out the survey were more apt to pick the Chestertown location. Staff members, it was pretty much an even split between Chestertown and a standalone at Wharton. Parents overwhelmingly not overwhelmingly, but there was significantly more parents that picked the Wharton standalone. And then overall, you'll see when we added it together, it's pretty close in terms of Chestertown and the standalone. I think that you see the majority of the people were not particularly enamored by the Wharton attachment. I think there was some concern about you're putting new with old, and what are you going to run into when you attach a building as well. We didn't want to put all of the comments that everybody submitted, so we just picked a few that favored inclusion of 5th grade into middle school. I will say that by and large, when we asked that question in the survey, there were very few individuals that seemed to be against moving the 5th graders with the middle school students. I think there were more individuals that were in favor of that, simply because I think we talked about it as a board. We used to have 5th grade in with the middle school, so it's not.
When did we make that change?
I think when the consolidation
Yeah, I know,
happened.
but when was that?
2010.
Okay.
Yeah, so those were some of the comments. Those that opposed it felt it was unsafe, there was too much of an age difference, too much exposure at a very young age, bad things taught to younger children, sounds like a disaster, an absolute horrible idea. We didn't want to exclude putting in some of the negative comments over making it sound like it's all a great idea. Location in Chestertown versus Wharton. Those that were in favor of Chestertown, brought up the fact that it could be walking field trips in the community. It's a familiar location, opportunities for community service, spur on influx of families to Chestertown, closer ties between the schools and town government, more people caring about our middle schoolers, large percentage of county population is nearby, new scenery to look forward to. In other words, going from a middle school campus to the high school campus That's what people were saying in change of scenery. Those that favor Wharton thought it was an easier transition from 8th to 9th, more centrally located, a commuter campus for all students rather than a town school for Chestertown, cost savings and academic programming opportunities if you're closer to the high school, flexible utilization of staff and schedules, secondary schools working and collaborating together, sharing resources. Middle school students could take high school level courses because it would be within walking distance, proximity to the community center, and KCHS students and programs could easily walk to the middle school campus to get their hours. Bus routes consolidated and traffic in town lessened. But on the flip side, you know, would there be more traffic at Wharton? So, I mean, there's always a pro and a con, and then it will help with school renovations, minimize distractions. The Wharton standalone versus the attachment. Those that favored the standalone thought it was an uncomplicated solution. They did not believe the chance for the high school to have some remodeling done was worth the safety of the students, because there was some concern about separating the populations. Those that favored the attached thought it would be allow students to be familiar with the school building, opportunities for the middle school to network with older students, mentoring opportunities for high school students, events with greater numbers of students, and you know, with extracurricular, students could be part of the band, and some of the clubs and those kinds of things, drama presentations, and those opportunities where students could collaborate and work together. My high school and middle school were combined and were very separated, so there was no contact with the older students and younger students. The buildings can be designed for limited and intentional interactions when needed, and KCHS is in need of some upgrades. Oops. So the planning options that came out with the community listening sessions were the cost. Wanted more details, and accurate costing was necessary, accounting for all the factors that would go into the project. And of course, process discussion about the location, grades, scope should be made by the new Board of Education and the new Board of County Commissioners. Questions raised were the educational program itself. If the middle school and the high school were attached, how would the administration ensure that there was no inappropriate age or grade mixing? That was really a concern that came out quite frequently. How would the schedules be worked out to ensure that the high school students did not lose educational, athletic, and extracurricular activities? And how would the lunch and physical education be managed? So these are things that we would definitely need to be able to demonstrate, work out a schedule to prove that it could be done. Not just say it can be done, but let's spend some time showing that it actually could be done. The location, which location is more centrally located? And do we make that determination by road distance, by bus travel time? Those were some questions that were raised during the listening sessions. And how were the costs determined? What level of accuracy do the costs include? And do the costs account for future condition use of the existing Kent County Middle School facility itself? Again, process, the decision should be made by the new Board of Ed and the new Board of County Commissioners. So the recommendation that we're bringing forth this evening is to complete a feasibility study. The objective would be to obtain a third-party recommendation for best planning alternative. And when you're building a new facility, it's required by the Interagency Commission that if you're going to demo or abandon, they do recommend that you complete a feasibility study. Although in this case, because of the age of the building, that we could have probably submitted a request for a waiver, and that would have been granted by the IAC. But given all of that, it still didn't change the fact that we really felt strongly that we should complete a feasibility study. The content of the feasibility study should be the analysis of planning alternatives, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But the educational impact, the community impact, transportation costs, and other factors. We should consider the existing conditions of the building, the site, structures, access, utilities, zoning, and other legal conditions. That would also include if we move out to Wharton or even consider other locations in Chestertown. You know, what are the costs going to be for existing conditions? Design capacity, as we stated during the listening sessions, the state is not going to allow us to build a school for 700 students if we don't have 700 students. So it's going to be based, design capacity is going to be based on student enrollment and educational programming, which is what the Ed Specifications Committee was coming up with in terms of, you know, how many spaces do we need for small group activities, for providing one-on-one tutoring for students. What kind of spaces do we need and what is currently lacking in the middle school itself. Educational program outline the space matrix, and also consider all of the things that I just spoke about in terms of what do we need, what do we need to be adjacent to other portions of the building. Like right now, we've got the health clinic on a completely different side of the building than the administration, so that makes it really difficult. Concept plans, the site plan, the building plans, cost analysis. The IAC will ask us to complete life cycle costs. As we look at the cost analysis, they want to see, you know, what's going to be the best use of long-range life cycle costs for the building. The pros and cons. We've already got a lot of pros and cons summary that we can provide to the vendor that would be completing the feasibility study. And then, of course, any other additional information, which would be mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all of those analysis that would have to be made in terms of looking at the possibilities of where this would be. In talking with the committee and also thinking about what has come out with the listening sessions, we really believe that we need to explore 5 different options with the feasibility study. We should definitively determine that renovation of the existing facility is not going to work with regard to upgrading and providing opportunities for our students. So I think we need to address that. We also need to look at replacement at existing site in Chestertown, answer the storm water management question that we raised and that we talked about, and then also consider any other site in Chestertown. We don't know what sites those are. Obviously, it would need to be approximately 30 acres, and we need to look at what available sites would be in Chestertown. I know there was some discussion about a land swap. That could be very cumbersome, but you know, in terms of what does that look like, we need to explore all those options in the feasibility study. Replacement as a standalone facility at the high school site and replacement as an attachment to the high school.
Dr. Couch, can I just ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
Just going back to the comment about the land swap, it's been mentioned in different meetings and at different times in different places. At what point do we need to know what that looks like? You know, when we go in, because it's out there, but I don't think anyone has heard what that looks like.
Right. I think that when we, and I'll talk about the timeline for the feasibility study, but when we hire the vendor, then those discussions need to be happening in terms of what are we looking at. Now, keep in mind, the land swap involves commissioners. It doesn't involve the Board of Ed per se.
So
because ultimately, as we occupy the building, it's ours. Once we abandon that building, it goes back to the county.
So it's safe to say that if there is an idea out there, it'd be really helpful
to know what that is.
Exactly. Thank you.
So, in regards to that, again, as President Getz is saying, it's been brought up, and no one, has anyone?
No one has come to
Brought
me with
forward.
anything yet. That doesn't mean that there isn't discussion, but has anybody shared anything with board members or with me personally? I have not heard of anything. The project schedule that we would have with the feasibility study. The approval, I'm asking for your approval for us to move forward with designing the scope in which we would conduct the feasibility study. It would incorporate those 5 options that we talked about, and it would include all of the areas that we said would need to be reviewed. And a market study really is when you're looking at another site in Chestertown, you're really doing a mini market study in that regard. So, you know, we're talking, the more options we look at, the more the cost is going to be for the feasibility study. Now, the state will share in the cost of this, but in talking with Dr. Lever this afternoon, with all of the things that we're going to have to be accomplished in terms of researching the 5 different areas for the feasibility study, we're probably looking at about $100,000 to complete the feasibility study.
So 5 options. The first one is whether or not renovation of the existing structure.
Right.
Why do I think that months ago, the state told us that if we wanted some financial help with them, that was not to be an option?
Because they do not want to see us.
No, I mean,
yeah.
I'm remembering correctly, right?
Right,
Okay.
you are. And in terms of early on, when we met with the IAC, they strongly said that is really not a good use of your money. The reason why we want to explore that now is because it came out in the listening sessions in terms of, you know, have you definitively proven that this is not a good option? And what are the long-range costs to putting money into an old building? So I think that we need to answer that in order to gain support from the community and from our stakeholders. I think we need to answer that definitively.
I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I remember having
But I
visited that once.
I think that there was sort of an implication that if the number seemed reasonable, that we wouldn't need state money to do it.
Yeah.
But I think that our understanding from being on the facility strategic plan is that that number is not going to be something that the county could cover on its own.
You know, several people have talked to me about the advantages of being in Chestertown, because, you know, near the Sultana, for example, and the library and the Y. So if they're looking at other properties in Chestertown, I think, you know, they ought to be within walking distance of these places that people are saying that they can walk to now, because if it's, you know, 2 miles out of town or something. So
It's not in Chestertown anymore.
Well, just to give you a visual of what 15 acres looks like as opposed to 30, which is what ideally is, the long vacant lot right there at Lamont Chemical across from Walgreens, you know, that big, right? That's only 13 acres. So if there's a big space somewhere, I don't know where it is.
Right. So this would be the project schedule. Approval by the Board of Education to pursue the feasibility study. That's what I'm going to ask you to approve this evening. We would begin a solicitation, putting together what we would want in the feasibility study. Then we would begin to put together a committee of people that would help us draft all of those requirements that we want in terms of what the vendor would, and looking at the vendor in terms of, you know, how much experience do they have. You're probably looking at architectural firms that have completed a lot of these feasibility studies. This is a pretty complex because we're not just looking at 1 or 2 options, we're looking at 5. So we really want to have somebody who's got some experience and is able to do that. We figure that it's probably going to be December, January, in order to get all that sorted out. We would come back to the board in January, hopefully with a recommendation to approve the vendor who would be completing the feasibility study, and we anticipate that it would take till about April, potentially May, to complete the feasibility study.
Do we have $100,000 for a feasibility study? If we say, yes, we want to move forward with this, do we need to go to the county commissioners and ask them to help us pay for this?
Well, half of the money will come from the state.
Half of the 100,000?
Half of the 100,000 will come from the state. So, you know, that's one of the things that we'll have to explore is in terms of where we're going to, how we're going to pay for it.
Yeah, I don't think we can't not do it though.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I don't think that should be a stopping point at this point in terms of saying, well, you know, we don't have an exact answer of where the money's going to come from, so that we can't do it. I think we have to do it. If we're going to move forward with this project, I think to satisfy all of the questions that are still out there, and honestly, I have a lot of questions still that need to be addressed and need to be answered, and this is the only way we're going to get answers to those questions.
Is it too broad to adjust the replacement at another site in Chestertown to replacement at another site in Kent County? I mean, if we're going to be sort of opening up that option to a land swap, do we want to really open it up?
But I think if we're opening, I think the context in which it was that there was a land swap in the context of being in Chestertown. So if we open it up to the county and we decide to put a middle school in Massey, it just doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, I think that was the direction. But again, we haven't had any formal, communication, so it'd be great to know that.
I just hope that those that have made comments and have shown so much concern about schools in their community will take some concern when the school is built and actually give back to the school that's in their community. It's easy to say we care about a school when the hours change, but way before that we didn't have much emphasis on the school. So hopefully the energy that is being put into creating feasibility studies and the hard work that the administration is putting in forth, that folks would really come and rally behind the school and find ways to be involved once it's built and where it's built.
Yeah, and I'll just add to Tricia's comment. I think it's absolutely wise that we do it. I think, I will add, I have a million questions as well. And I'd like to know what that looks like. We'll have to find what that $50,000 or whatever that looks like and where we can get that. But it's thoughtful, it's wise, it's strategic to understand why, what, and who, and where.
I think we owe it to the community.
Yeah.
Like Brian Matthews said, this is the largest construction project that Kent County's ever undertaken. So we need to be as transparent as possible. We need to show the community that we took our due diligence and made the most informed decision that we could. The fact that, the project probably in September looked like it might have been fast-tracked for some sort of decision by December. Initially, that was the time frame that we were going to make a decision in December about where it's going. Now it's not that we're going all the way back to step one because we have all this information, but we really are starting anew.
Right. Well, I think what we've done is we've listened to, we put together 4 listening sessions, which is not a requirement. It was something that this board and I wanted to do in terms of, here we've got this information, now let's get it out there and let's get information back from the community. And I felt strongly that because this is a community project, we're a small community, we really needed to see what everybody thought about the project and what other things have we not considered as we move forward with the planning of this project. And I think we heard a lot of information, and I want to emphasize that we listened to what the community had to say, and that's why we're going down this road. So this is the other thing I wanted to share with you. Once we complete the feasibility study, then it would be reviewed by the Board of Education in April or May. And then I'm proposing that we go out again and do community hearings. And I figure that we would do that sometime in May or June, depending upon, this is ambitious. Once we hire somebody to do the feasibility study, they may not be available to start right away. So this is just a proposed schedule based on the best information that we have right now. If the feasibility study is not done until July, then we're going to have to make some adjustments. But anyways, if it were to be completed in April, we would discuss it with the Board of Ed, then we would move forward with community hearings, then we would hopefully have a joint meeting with the county commissioners, and then we would request for planning from the IAC and Maryland Stadium Authority sometime in the fall of 2023. And then we would move forward with design and construction, and then best case scenario, occupancy would be in 2026. That's a very aggressive schedule, but I knew that you would be wanting to see what it looked like in terms of, best case scenario and planning, and that's if there's no roadblocks along the way.
Are there any additional questions, comments? Okay, this is an action item. The administration is recommending board approval to complete a feasibility study for the KCMS project. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion by Ms. McGee. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments or questions, concerns? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the notification of our next meeting. The next...
Could I just interrupt for
Sure.
1 second? We did get the plaques for the Emma Miller unveiling ceremony. They did arrive, and so we tentatively have set a date for December the 10th at 10 o'clock at Garnett Media Center, and that's a Saturday. And since the plaques did arrive, we are moving forward with planning the unveiling. It would be the unveiling of the plaque for Emma Miller, and would also be for Henry Highland Garnett, which would be in the front of the building as well. So I'm inviting board members, anybody in the public that's interested. It's December the 10th, 10 o'clock a.m. at Garnett Media Center.
Great. Okay, the notification of our next meeting. The next meeting of the Board of Education of Kent County will be held on Monday, December 12th, 2022, beginning at 5:30 p.m. with the open session. Open session will be immediately followed by the board members going into closed session. The open session will resume at 6:30 p.m. This meeting will be located at the administrative building in the boardroom, this room, located at 5608 Boundary Avenue, Rockall, Maryland, 21661. The last item on the agenda is to adjourn. The administration is recommending approval to adjourn this meeting. Do we have a motion to do so? Mr. Johnson has the motion. Do we have a second? We have a second by Ms. McGee. Any further comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, we'll call